Well, I'll be damned. So, I guess I need to apologize. In a recent-ish video, I very confidently said that Derek Chauvin will be found not guilty of murdering George Floyd. I believed this at the time, and I was mistaken in this belief, and I have never been happier to be wrong. It is unquestionably a good thing that Derek Chauvin was convicted. There would have been riots if he had gotten off scot-free. There should have been riots if he got off scot-free. I believed he was, and I was getting ready to go start some trouble. But during the Chauvin trial, and especially after the conviction, I noticed a number of narratives popping up. And I thought that these were troubling enough that I should address them here in whatever the hell we're calling this now. So the first and the most prominent narrative that I would like to address is the notion that this was an act of justice. That this is a blow that's been struck against police unions, against the police generally, or even against the government as a whole. That's not... I hate to be the one to burst your bubble, but no, that's not how this works. I'm sorry. The prosecution for the case repeatedly stated that they were not interested in prosecuting police generally, or even the police of Minneapolis specifically. They were only interested in prosecuting Derek Chauvin, and only for the thing that they were claiming that he did, the murder of George Floyd. And I believe that it is reasonable to understand that judges and other juries might not come to similar conclusions based on the result of this trial. Even in similar cases of police misconduct. Even in more egregious cases of police misconduct. More egregious cases, like a 13-year-old child being riddled with bullets while his hands are in the air. More egregious cases, like a 15-year-old child being shot by the police after she called them because she suspected she was going to be mugged. Not only can we not assume that prospective cases of police officers who riddle children with bullets will end in convictions based just on this case, but we cannot assume that they will even go to court based on this case. All of which is to say that, while the conviction of Derek Chauvin was good and was necessary, it changes nothing in the grander scheme of things. There's another narrative that I would like to talk about, one that was brought up by Nancy Pelosi, most notably, and one that is much more insidious. And that is the idea that George Floyd sacrificed himself for the greater good. Just so we're clear right off the bat, George Floyd did not sacrifice himself. George Floyd did not choose to die as a martyr for civil rights or for the greater good. Derek Chauvin was found guilty of second and third degree murder. That means George Floyd was murdered. And this narrative is particularly offensive for at least two reasons I can think of off the top of my head. The first is that to suggest that someone who was violently, needlessly murdered had some say in whether or not they were violently, needlessly murdered is pretty goddamn offensive. And to be clear, it would be offensive regardless of who it was said about. Imagine saying that Amber Hagerman sacrificed herself for the greater good. Imagine saying that the victims of the Holocaust sacrificed themselves for the greater good. What is happening when people are using that word, sacrificed, is that people are individualizing the problem. They are reducing it down to one person, or a group of people, and they are saying that the problem, the bad thing that happened, is that that one person, or that group of people, had to be sacrificed in the first place. And in most instances, that individualization is wildly inappropriate. Amber Hagerman was not the first child to be abducted and murdered. She was not the last either. Nazi Germany would not have stopped at simply killing the victims of the Holocaust. If given free rein over the people of the world, they would have killed most of the people in the world. The police have killed over 1,000 people every year since 2016, and we're on track to hit 1,200 people this year. That's 1,200 George Floyds. The problem with police officers is not that one police officer needlessly, painfully, and violently murdered one man. The problem with police officers is that they can't stop killing people. And to claim that George Floyd was unique, to claim that the actions of Derek Chauvin were unique in any way, as the prosecution did, is to obfuscate that fact. There is a second, more insidious reason that this narrative is offensive. A much more personal reason, at least to me. There's this idea in society that the only meaningful way, the only real way to oppose wicked people is to just not resist them. I believe this idea came about as a result of a misunderstanding of the use of nonviolent resistance. When nonviolent resistance is used effectively, it either disrupts extant systems and their ability to operate, or it demonstrates that there is a disproportionate response being had to people who are otherwise peacefully protesting. 10 soldiers and Nixon went down to Ohio, and 4 college kids got shot and killed. For example. But that idea has morphed into the idea that the only meaningful way, the only real way to oppose wicked people or violent systems is to throw yourself in front of them and let yourself be destroyed. To sacrifice yourself, and as you lay dying, hope that someone else will make the world better for you. And there's something that I want to make perfectly clear. It is not an act of heroism to let wicked people do what they will, to you or to anyone else. It is not an act of heroism to lie down and die. Things don't change because enough people cross their fingers and hope. Things change because people stand up and fight back and force things to change. And that is what we have seen over the course of the last year. My first instinct when writing this script was to say that the outcome of the trial didn't have anything to do with wide-scale protests that occurred, but that's just not true. It's easy to forget because everything happened so fast, but second-degree murder wasn't even on the table until the 3rd Precinct got lit up. Without the 3rd Precinct being burned down, there might not have even been a trial. So, here's where I'm at. If all the people in power, if all the police and all the senators and congresspeople and all the business people want a mulligan, if they want to pretend that George Floyd was the only person killed by the police in 2020, okay. That's fine. We can do that. Because if we want justice, if we want change in increments, we know exactly where we need to start. Well, that took a while, didn't it? I'm sorry about that. I've been unable to make videos for a number of personal reasons that I won't get into, for parasocial reasons. What I will say is that it is a bit fortuitous that I had to wait so long to make this video about George Floyd. Not just because the anniversary is coming up, but also because, well, the police in Springfield have been acting up. I'll just read this statement directly. Gregory Smalls was shot 4 times by a police officer on March 5th, 2021, during a manic episode where he attempted to take his own life. His mother called 911 to save his life. Instead, he was placed in critical condition and required surgeries due to the gunshot wounds. Gregory was charged with a felony assault. 24 hours after his family spoke out on social media and others began to advocate for Gregory Smalls via emails and calls, an offer was made to reduce the felony to a misdemeanor. This offer requires that Gregory plead guilty to assault of an officer that he did not touch and a manic episode that he does not remember. His court date is set for May 27, 2021. Gregory had a gunshot wound of the abdomen, back, right shoulder, and forearm along with acute kidney injury. The shooting caused damage and concerns for his kidney along with other internal areas. He required stomach staples that have successfully been removed. His breathing improved enough to have breathing tubes removed, and he is on a high-protein diet after being taken off of the feeding tube. Gregory was diagnosed prior to this episode and needed an officer that was capable of responding to a mental health crisis. State's Attorney Dan Wright stated that Officer Hahn was justified in using deadly force and Adam Hahn will not face charges. In lieu of putting in any links where you can support me or what I do here, I'm going to put links to support Gregory and his court case and his medical bills in the underbar. I'm also going to leave contact information for the State's Attorney for Illinois, Dan Wright, and I would ask you to email Dan Wright or call Dan Wright and ask him to drop the charges against Gregory Smalls. So yeah, that's all I had to say about that. I'm all said out. I don't know when I'm going to be able to make another video, and I don't know what that video is going to be about, but until we get there, go do something important, and take care of yourselves, alright?